No matter what character you're using or want to use in Genshin Impact, they're gonna have to have a build. A build is what the character's artifacts and weapons will be, along with some other things that vary depending on the character. A character could scale off of stats like defense or HP, they could use elemental reactions so you give them more elemental mastery, they could need to use their burst more so you give them more energy recharge, etc. Builds are some of the most important things to have for your characters, and even a bad build will help your character out. Using an unbuilt character is basically asking for your characters to always deal less than 500 to 1000 damage without elemental reactions, so nobody would willingly use an unbuilt character, right? Well, I've been recommended to do a challenge along these lines a bunch, and in the past I didn't really want to do it because it seems like it would be too hard. But I've been feeling like I haven't really done a difficult team challenge since No Mora, which was 7 months ago. But if you don't count that challenge because I didn't finish it, my latest difficult challenge was a character dies after every Archon quest over a year ago. The rules of this challenge are as follows. I cannot give any characters any artifacts. My characters can only have level 1 1-star weapons. I cannot level characters' talents. I am allowed to level and ascend characters. I can level artifacts and weapons that my characters are not using for stuff like achievements and adventure handbook quests. No healing items in battle, and all characters are allowed, but trial characters are banned. Now let's see if you can beat Genshin Impact without building any characters. For the start of this challenge, I wanted to get a good character to start the challenge off with. If this account started with the first 10 pull giving me either a weapon or a character that I felt wouldn't be useful, I would just reroll again. Hopefully I won't have to do that. Could you offer me a good character in these trying times? Or offer me bullshit? Did I just see what I think I saw? My reroll accounts are cursed with this fucking weapon. Next account. You could give me a 5-star... No, you could give me a weapon, and I would be fine if it wasn't a 5-star weapon, and if it was paired with a playable character. There was a delay. There's gonna be a character. A good character for this challenge, because I already know it's gonna be hell. Please, a good character. My bar for a good character is pretty low, so give me something
Kaya, Knight of Favonius.
I should have said a good character that's not free. Because Kaya's a good character. But he's free. While Kaya is a good character, you get Kaya for free very early on, so this was unnecessary. Hopefully the third account can give us something. You know, it'd be pretty cool to get like a 5-star. That would be pretty cool. Oh. Well, it would be pretty cool to get a good 4-star character. Like a 4-star character that we don't start with, you know? A good
I'm Beto. You've heard of my ship, the Crux, and its...
We ended up sticking with Beto. Beto is a perfectly acceptable character for us to get at the start. Not only can she counter attacks, but she can also use some useful reactions like Spread and Hyper Bloom once we get a Dendro character. The first thing we need to do is clear the 3 domains, and first is Amber's domain, where we beat the easy enemies and then trigger the Pyro Monument with Amber. Next is Kaya's domain. This domain had more easy enemies and we could easily jump over the water. We get Kaya from this domain, but right after we get an even more interesting character. Ooh,
My name's Feminine. I'm a diver.
This was the character when I was looking at the banner, I was thinking, I want to use you.
No
Fremine is an interesting character. While I don't really like how he's pretty much only an on-field DPS, and I feel like his playstyle is a little clunky, I like Fremine a lot, so I'll be using him for now. Last is Lisa's domain, which we could skip by jumping off an invisible platform. That's the end of Act 1, and now we need to get to AR10 to start Mondstadt Act 2. In solo challenges, I find this a good time to go over the character I'm using's pros and cons, but for this challenge I'm going to go over why I think this challenge will be really difficult. The main reasons that our stats are going to get pretty low. Artifacts' main jobs are to improve your stats, but without them you effectively can't do that. Most of our characters are only going to get one stat outside of attack, defense, and HP increased because of ascension stats. But some characters' ascension stats are one of the 3 stats that are always raised when you ascend. For example, Xingqiu's ascension stat is attack percent, which isn't very helpful because his attack already gets raised a bit when ascending. Also, because we're using basic weapons, we can't use any cool passives. This challenge is comparable to No More in a lot of ways, But what's different is that we can actually level our characters, which is pivotal in character improvement. What we did to get to AR10 is monster exploration, including collecting animalculi, opening chests, unlocking teleport waypoints, completing adventure handbook quests, and doing ley lines. Something I'm already noticing is that we can't deal any substantial damage without elemental reactions. Somehow one of the strongest reactions on the team was Shatter from Fremine, which is interesting to say the least. Starting Kaya's story quest gets us to AR10, which gives us a free 10 pull, but I also can use a single pull on event banner. Oh my god. Lenny. Oh
Hi there.
no!
I'm Tainari, Forest Watcher
Really?
of the Avidia Forest.
I
My
don't
duty is
mind
to
him,
preserve
but
both the
Lenny would be
rainforest
so much
ecosystem
cooler.
and the...
I had mixed feelings on Tainari. At the time, I wasn't very happy about getting Tainari because while he is really good, I thought it would be way cooler to use Lenny. While that is partially true, Tainari quickly proved me wrong. Not only is he just a strong character, he also gives us dendro reactions, which might be very important for harder fights. Now the 10 pull. I don't care about Gaming. I might use Gaming later, but not now. Now time to start Act 2. We meet the man with the black hole who takes us to Windrise where we fight an Eye of the Storm. My team really doesn't have a good rotation because I have 3 DPSs, so it would be a good idea to replace at least one of them. Even still, this battle was easy. We steal the Holy Lyre, meet Diluc, and then go to the Fatui hideout. The only dangerous enemy in there was an agent, and I did this domain before deciding to ban trial characters, which is why I used Diluc. Now we need to get 3 teardrop crystals to summon Dvalin, and the first one requires us to beat a Ruin Guard to get it. Tainari was easily able to stun it, which gives us a good amount of time to hurt it. We get the next one by walking into a Hilichurl camp, and last is the domain. While this challenge definitely hasn't reached hard territory yet, I can already feel in this domain that fights are getting slower. Something I usually do with my team challenges is use characters that I like or think are underrated in the battle department even if there are better options because I find these challenges a good time to do that. Sure, it would probably make the challenge a bit harder, but I don't mind. But for this challenge, I don't think that'll be an option for me in the future, which is sad because I was looking forward to using Fremine and Beto, but they'll definitely need to be switched out sooner or later. With that done, we can summon Dvalin.
Think you can get away?
That's Act 2 complete. Now we need to get to AR18 to start Act 3, and this is one of the harder AR grinds to do. Something that I unlocked that will really help with the AR grind is commissions. Commissions give a lot of experience, they're easy to do, and you can do them every day. After completing my commissions, I was doing some random exploration and I switched Gaming in for a time trial, but instead of switching Lumen back into the party, I decided that Gaming would stay on the team. I guess welcome to the party, Gaming. Gaming is pretty strong with his elemental skill, and it can also be used for easy traversal. He takes a lot of HP from himself, and that's especially a problem on a team with no healer. I feel like I'm going to use a lot of healing items on my Gaming. While venturing over to Liyue Harbor, I reached AR15, which allows me to ascend my characters. Not only is this a very important power upgrade, but it also allows us to get 8 free pulls on standard banner, and after unlocking a few Shrine of Depths and completing Kaya's story quest, I had 7 event pulls and 10 standard pulls. 4-star. Another Beto, a Beto constellation. That's better than a lot of other things I could have gotten on this banner. Four-star shield character or healer, or even a hydro character. Jinyan, shield character. That's good. And official. That's cool. Funny how I was happy to get a Beto constellation, and then right after I get a character that I'll be 100% replacing Beto with once I can get her to a decent level. Official is a very good electro applier for elemental reaction teams like Spread, who we have Tainari for. We will gladly put Fischl in the party. While I was considering putting Jinyan in the party, I didn't because I would much rather have Layla, who was on the banner at the time. We're currently at AR16, so we only need 2 more levels to reach AR18. Luckily I still have a few story quests for this, those being Amber story quest and Zhengling story quest. Pairing those with ley lines gets us to AR 18 so we can finally start Act 3. But before starting that quest, I finally put Fischl in the party. And then right after I did that, I got a letter from her. Okay, what the fuck is this irony? I just added Fischl to the party and it's Fischl's birthday. What? First was the Hydro Abyss Mage, which Tainari absolutely shredded through. Inside the Storm Terror's lair, we need to trigger 3 light actuators, and only one of them requires combat. I don't really have many good counters for Pyro enemies, but Fischl and Fremenade do fine against the Pyro Abyss Mage. Now time for Dvalin. All I really wanted from this fight is for it to not take 3 phases, and thankfully it didn't take 3 phases. It took 4. This fight took 4 minutes, which is probably one of the longest Dvalin fights I've had doing these challenges. Thankfully, that's the end of Act 3. Now we need to get to AR-23 to start Liyue Act 1. We have quite the backlog of story quests that I still need to do, and some story quests that we unlock by clearing Act 3. I started with Lisa's story quest, and soon after completing it, I did some pulls on Event Banner. Layla. Thank you for the Layla. Another 4-star. Farzan or another Layla? Another Layla. Okay, thanks, game. We finally have Layla. I've wanted her for a while because she offers us a pretty good shield that functionally has infinite uptime, which works better than Xinyan's shield. I still don't have the necessary materials to get her to a comfortable level, but once I do, she's going straight onto the team. After getting her, I did the Wind Trace event, and might I say, this is not fucking Wind Trace! How did Hoyoverse fuck up one of the most fun reoccurring events? In this version of Wind Trace, the hunter is almost guaranteed to lose because of how unfair it is. And I think it's one of the best examples of if it ain't broke, don't fix it ever, because the original Wind Trace formula worked so well because there was a real chance for loss on both sides, but this time they made it so the rebels pretty much never have to turn into any object if they play right, which, if you remember, was the entire point of Wind Trace! Sorry for that tangent. I did this mainly to get Primo Gems and Hero's Wit. After that I did Spiral Abyss for more Primo Gems. I wished with the 6 wishes I had and got nothing. You might be wondering what I want from Event Banner, and the answer is Wanderer. Not only is he a good DPS, he also would make traveling a lot easier. The next day I did Diluc story quest, some commissions, and Razor story quest. Near the end of Razor story quest, Layla joined the team. It feels a little bad to bench Fremenade because he's been pretty good so far, but Layla will definitely make my rotation better and give me a decent shield. When I reached AR-22, I decided it was time to fight some world bosses for my characters. The Jade Plume Terror Shroom isn't that bad, the Aeon Blight Drake is very slow and boring, but not too bad because we could stun it, the Electro Hypostasis is the Electro Hypostasis, and the Emperor of Fire and Iron is really annoying. I have no good way of stunning him, and he's quite strong. It actually took me a few attempts to beat him, but I found a pretty good way of taking down his Pyro Shield eventually, which made it more tolerable. Next was Dragonspine, and to put it lightly, I did a lot. I raised the Skyfrost Nail, got the 3 boxes, unlocked every part of Dragonspine map, got a bunch of chests, and even got the Frostbearing Tree to level 9. You want to know the best part about this? It only took about 3.5 to 4 hours to do all that. Dragonspine exploration is nowhere near as bad as people make it out to be. We're AR-24 now, which means we can start Liyue Act 1. The team right now is Gaming, Tainari, Fischl, and Layla. The man who will make you suffer the wrath of the rock dies, and now we have to tell all the Adepti about his death. First is Mooncarver, who gives us a buff that increases our energy recharge, which makes the fight easier. While our team is definitely far from strong, they're trudging along pretty well. Next is Mountain Shaper, and all we have to do is find this guy's brother in the Amber, and now we're off to Cloud Retainer. We made some food for her and then skipped her domain by jumping off a tree with Gaming. Last is Zhao, and the only part we're talking about is the Ruin Hunter. The nice thing about this is that we could paralyze it pretty much right at the start, allowing us to hit it without worrying about dodging. That's where Act 1 ends, and before starting Act 2 I got the materials necessary for ascending my characters. I had also accumulated a 10 pull on Event Banner, so let's see if we can get Wanderer. It'd be real cool to get a Wanderer in this 10 pull. Well, Farazan's always there, you know. Oh my god. She's not even on the banner. 2 characters that I already had and had no intention of using. Fantastic. Let's just get the Ascension Domain out of the way and then start Act 2. The Ascension Domain kinda made me realize that our entire team relies on elemental reactions. Our straight damage is pitiful, but elemental reactions like Overloaded, Melt, and by far the best one on our team, Spread, gives us the damage we need to clear this challenge. Now it's time to start Act 2. We meet the man who will make you suffer the wrath of the rock, and then go to Mondstadt to boil some rocks. We had to fight a bunch of hilly trolls, and I switched out Gaming for Amber to heat up the pot faster, so we were effectively only using 3 characters, but even then it wasn't too bad. Next is Granny's Teapot, which was filled with slimes. Fischl and Gaming work very well in this domain because there were a lot of Hydro and Cryo slimes. Lastly are the treasure hoarders at the Guizhong Ballista. I'd consider this the first really slow fight. There weren't that many treasure hoarders, and the fight ended up taking 3.5 minutes. All in all, it could have been worse, but I fear for how slow future fights could potentially get. We do some gaming with the man who will make you suffer the wrath of the rock, which is where Act 2 ends. Now we need to get to AR-28 to start Act 3. We're only AR-26 right now, so this will take a bit. Farazan, please. It took fucking long enough to get Hatsune Miku. The reason I wanted Farazan so much was because of Wander. Farazan buffs animal characters, and Wanderer works very well with Farazan's buffs. After getting her, I decided to start farming Wanderer's materials because farming fungi is hell, so I wanted to get it over with. I wasn't focusing on getting experience at the time, I was more so focusing on getting materials and Primogems for Scaramouche, so I ended up doing Spiral Abyss and got another Farazan. I returned to Liyue to do some random exploration and world quests. I did both parts of Treasure Lost, Treasure Found, Luhua Landscapes, The Tree Who Stands Alone, and the Chi of Yor. I also did the puzzles at Qianshu Valley, and even defeated the Prima Geobishop. Granted, it took 3.5 minutes, and I heavily used Layla's shield to deal damage, but I still beat it! After that, I fought the Aeon Blight Drake for Wanderer, and this fight just gets slower and slower every time I fight it. You might be wondering why I'm doing all this pre-farming for Wanderer, and it's because Wanderer is guaranteed. If you remember, I got Tighnari on Event Banner, and I haven't gotten a 5-star on that banner since, so my 5-star on this banner will be Wanderer. Exploring the 3 ruins in Lisha gets us really close to AR-28, so I just opened a few chests, and now we can start Act 3.
Stop it now! Show's over!
We triggered the Anemo mechanism in the mountains with Farazan, and then went to the Guizhong Ballista to fight the Millilith. This fight wasn't as long as the Treasure Hoarder fight, but it was still slow and boring. Later we have to sing to the flowers for the man who will make you suffer the wrath of the rock, which causes 3 Whopper flowers to appear out of the ground. We promptly drawn them with Layla, and next is Child, who was probably mad that this is my first time mentioning him during the entire Liyue part of this script despite being a prominent character in the Archon quests. We took him down for thinking he was important with no real problems. Jokes aside, this fight could have gone a lot differently. If he hits you, he can deal a lot of damage, especially to our characters with basically no HP or defense. Lastly is Osile, and I don't even need to tell you that this was easy. That's the end of Act 3. Now we need to get to AR-30 to start Inazuma, and we also need to do the Danes of World quest and the We Will Be Reunited Archon quest, and I was still preoccupied with trying to get Wanderer. Literally everything I was doing was for Primogems at this point, even the mandatory Dainslift quests. A Genshin player blinded by Primogems pretty much can't be stopped, so we mowed through all the Daneslift World quest and a good amount of We Will Be Reunited. Tighnari almost died in the last fight of We Will Be Reunited, but that was because he entered the fight with half HP because...
We just need to follow the path we used to...
But even after completing both those quests, Scaramouche still eluded me. Now we have to fight our bosses again, and they're pretty much the same amount of difficulty as last time, but it's more annoying here because we have to fight them at least twice each for the 4 boss drops. I didn't fight the Emperor of Fire and Iron for Gaming because I had every intention of replacing him once I got Wanderer. After doing that for about an hour, it happened. This is the one. This is the one. Here he is. Finally, after all this time. Oh my god, Scaramouche, Wanderer, baby girl. It's 5 AM, I'm fucking tired. It took a lot of grinding, but we finally have him. He's going in the team over Gaming, because while Gaming has been pretty good, he's really been hogging my healing items with how much HP he takes from himself, and Scaramouche is just better than him. I tried for a bit to have a dedicated Scaramouche team, but they were underperforming, so I put him in the main team. The only bad part about using Scaramouche is that we have to farm the unbuilt trait twice as much as before because both Scaramouche and Layla take it, and fighting this thing is really dull and it takes forever, especially since we reached AR 30 and our world level were raised. Now this fight takes around 5 to 6 minutes, which is just absurd. You might think that our team doesn't have much synergy with Scaramouche, but Layla can give Scaramouche more crit rate with his passive talent, and we can switch between our two DPSs, Scara and Tighnari, when their cooldowns are going. It's definitely not the best rotation, but it's effective enough. In between fighting the Eon Blight Drake, I got Kneel Up Hollow Lotuses from other people's worlds and grinded for experience books to level our characters. Once I was done with that, it was finally time to start the Inazuma Prologue quest, which only had treasure hoarders and slimes. Here's the thing. Fights are definitely getting slower, but that doesn't mean they're getting harder. It is annoying how slow some fights could be from time to time, but generally I'm having an alright time with them. This challenge has been easier than I expected so far, but that doesn't mean that it's been easy. Our characters are weak and rely on elemental reactions, and grinding standard stuff like bosses for our characters is a pain because of how slow they take some of them down, like the Pyro Crab and the Eon Blight Drake. So while I haven't really gone in depth about any particular fights, which I normally do by now with challenging playthroughs, just know that this challenge isn't easy by any means. Anyways, with that done, we can go to Inazuma and force Scaramouche to confront his deadbeat mother. The team is Scaramouche, Tighnari, Fischl, and Layla. First thing we need to do in Act 1 is solve everyone's problems in Rito, but that's not as important as the combat, so let's skip to the transport mission. I compared this challenge to my No More challenge earlier, and that comparison led to me going into these fights a little nervous just because of how much agony it gave me in No More, even though I knew it probably wouldn't be that hard, and it wasn't. We were able to use Hyper Bloom using my favorite team comp, Tighnari, Fischl, and the Ocean.
4-star, please. Thank you, I didn't have to go to Hard Pity. What's it gonna be?
My name is
Noelle?
Maid of the Knights of
I
Favonius.
mean,
It's my
maybe.
pla-
4-star. Bennett or Seth? Oh.
That's not Bennett or Sethos.
At this point, I don't think there's a single character that I could get that I would put on the team over any of my characters. Way later, we have to break somebody out of jail while fighting the Tamriel Commission. I tested out a Hyperbloom team in this domain with Barbara over Scaramouche, and while it worked okay, I hated how it felt to play it, so I immediately went back to Scara. That's where Act 1 ends, and now we need to complete both Ayaka's and Yoimiya's story quests, which are both boring and unimportant, so let's skip to Act 2, where we start by fighting the Raiden Shogun. But using the word fight is a stretch because we just switched to our level 20 Amber and let her hit us until it triggered the end of the fight.
I won, guys. It's crazy.
After this, we need to save the Virgin from 2 Tamriel Commission soldiers, and this fight went longer than it probably should have, but it was still easy. At the front lines, we have some of the most intense battles known to man. That's the end of Act 2, and now Act 3. Off topic, having Scaramouche's flying capabilities is so nice for traversal. It's also a vast improvement over what Gaming could do for faster movement. First thing we have to do in Act 3 is fight some Ronin bordering Watatsumi Island. The first group was really easy, and the second group wasn't as easy, but still not too bad. Later we trigger the 3 Electro Pillars with Fischl and then make quick work of the Electro Lawatro that appears. The Virgin dies, and next is the Dilution Factory. Like the transport mission, I was feeling nervous for this domain because it was the domain that killed my Nomura run. Even though I was mostly sure that I could beat it, there was still a little bit of doubt in me. How did it go? The domain didn't even take 8 minutes and nobody got close to dying once. Wanderer meets his past self, which creates a black hole, but Yaimiko saves us from it. A bit later we meet...
It's science!
And then we fight a bunch of Tamriel Commission soldiers. Oddly enough, this fight felt like it was one of the slowest fights so far. It only took about 3.5 minutes, which isn't horrible, but it felt like 5 or so minutes when I was fighting them. Next is Signora, and for the first time in a long time, she was difficult. I did do it the first try and no one died, but I was damn close to losing a character multiple times. This fight, including both phases, took over 6 minutes. After Scaramouche took out his least reliable coworker, it's time for him to take out his mother. This fight was the complete opposite of Signora's. Signora put up a surprisingly good fight, but A was a total pushover. Scaramouche finally took down his mother, which means Inazuma is over. Now we need to get to AR-35 to start Sumeru, and we also need to complete the Danes of Chasm quest. We're already very close to reaching AR-35, so all we need to do is complete the Danes of quest and then we'll be ready to start Sumeru, right? Oh, if only it was that simple. We still need to get all of our characters' boss drops, which includes 8 Majestic Hooked Beaks from the Jade Plume Terrace Room, 8 Lightning Prisms from the Electro Hypostasis, and 16 Perpetual Calibers from the Eon Blight Drake. The Jade Plume Terrace Room takes about 3 minutes to beat on average, the Electro Hypostasis takes just under 2 minutes to beat on average, and the Eon Blight Drake takes about 3.5 minutes. I was really close to getting a 5-star on Standard Banner, and I didn't want to go through the same Primajump grinding hell that I did with Scaramouche, so I caved.
I'm mainly doing this just for Stardust, so I don't have to grind that much. But it would be nice to get the 5-star on this 10-pole. Thank you. What'll it be?
I am Jean,
Oh.
the Dandelion Knight, requesting approval to join your party.
I
From
am
this day
very
onwards,
mixed on
my honor
this.
and loyal-
I think Fischl has earned this.
Bow before the true majesty of the
I had very mixed feelings about getting Jean. A part of me was thinking that she might work and could blend well with the team, but the logical part of me knew that she wouldn't work. Even still, I tried her out against a few enemies, and while she did decently, there's nobody on my team I would replace for Jean. Also, her boss is really annoying to fight when one of your DPSs becomes useless in the fight. Guess that means I really do have to grind 16 Perpetual Calibers. After collecting resources from other people's worlds and fighting the Eon Blight Drake 8 times, we can ascend both Scara and Layla. I also grinded for level up books because I was constantly running out of them, and it didn't help that I wasted some of them on Jean. Now we need to do the Ascension Domain, which is still really easy. I was a little close to running out of time on the time trial in the last room of the domain, but I expected that to happen when going in. After all of that, I finally started the Danes of Chasm quest. We had counters for pretty much every Abyss enemy in this domain. Tarnarian Fischl for Hydro Abyss Heralds, Tarnarian Layla for Electro Abyss Heralds, and Scaramouche for all the pairs of Abyss Mages. Now it's finally time to start Sumeru. The team is still Scaramouche, Tighnari, Fischl, and Layla. Act 1 starts with us clearing out a Withering Zone, and because all the enemies were in water, we could use Bloom and Swirl very effectively. In the Dream Domain, the only enemies of note is the Hilichurl group, which is always unusually slow, but here it wasn't that bad. At Sumeru City, we get our Akasha Terminal and then go to Port Ormos and meet all Hatham. We buy some knowledge capsules from Dory for him, and we tested one that we bought on some fungi that made me feel like I was doing a normal playthrough with actual builds because of how fast I went down. Lastly were the Eremites at the docks, and they were easy, albeit slower to take down than I thought they would be. Next is Act 2, which is almost all dialogue except for a pretty easy Eremite fight near the end, so we'll skip to Act 3. We meet
the Doctor,
and then fight some Eremites in the forest, and I'm really starting to notice how slow some fights are really getting. And once again, not hard, just annoyingly long and drawn out. In the desert, we fight some more annoying tanky enemies, Rift Hounds. Luckily for the Electro Rift Hounds, we could use Fischl to make them weaker or something. I actually have no idea what that does. That's where Act 3 ends, and Act 4 begins with a ridiculously easy Eremite fight. This one literally only took 20 seconds when battles usually take over a minute and a half now. Also, while going through this footage, I realized that 3x speed Scaramouche charge attack might be the funniest thing ever. At the Elazar Hospital, we took on more Hilichurls and a Geolawachurl. The first group was moderately annoying with there being so many of them and being spread out, but the Geolawachurl was way worse. Not only was he strong, he was tanky too, so we really couldn't deal substantial damage. For the Dendropillars at the Elazar Hospital, we had Tighnari, so we didn't have to do any fancy tricks this time, unlike a lot of my other challenges. Lastly is the King Deshret domain, which only had fungi that we could mostly skip. The only group that posed a serious threat was the last one, which it did to an extent, but we were never at one point even close to losing. Lastly is Act 5, which starts with more Eremites that we had helpers for. Even with them, this took a bit over a minute and a half. I kinda just have to accept that time on fights is gonna be the norm. At Party's DI, we have to fight a bunch of Fatui soldiers, and this fight was really annoying. Even with counters to most of the Fatui soldiers' shields, there's no getting around the fact that they're tanky and we're weak. This fight took nearly 4 minutes, which is one of the longest in this playthrough, not including bosses. Still nothing compared to the 18 minutes in hell in Curara only. Way later, we have to enter the Dias Foundry, and given how the last fight just went, this is gonna be hell. Or not? Of the 10 Fatui enemies in this domain, we only had to fight 3 of them. I skipped pretty much every puzzle and enemy other than the 3 by using Scarra's flying, which caused the domain to only take about 6 minutes. Now it's time to make like the inversion of Genesis Archon Quest and have Scarra defeat himself. Much like that Archon Quest, Stew is easy here as well. Sorta. Phase 2 was obviously easy, but Phase 1 took 3.5 minutes, and Scarra took a lot of damage. But we got through it, and we took him down, which means Scaramouche has his memory back. Wait, wrong Archon Quest. Which means all that's left is the polluted part of Irminsul. Normally we have to fight the Rift Hounds first and then the Hilly Trolls and Electro Lavatrol on the boat, but as proven by the DS Foundry, Scaramouche's powers extend from just damage and traversal. He can also be used to skip parts that you don't want to do, which is what we did here. The Hilly Trolls on the boat weren't too bad, but the Electro Lavatrol almost killed Scarra. He was almost dead though, so we just finished it off, which means Act 5 of Sumeru is over. Now we need to get to AR40 to start Fontaine, and we also have to complete Kari Barrett. We're already very close to reaching AR40, so all you really need to do is Kari Barrett. The only fight worth noting is the Cryo Herald fight, and luckily I brought back Doming from the dead for this one fight to deal with the Cryo Shield. To get the rest of the experience I needed, I spent my condensed resin on the Trial Grounds of Thunder, and it only took 12 runs. Now we're at AR40 and we can start Fontaine. The reason I didn't grind bosses and materials for my characters is because it would take way too long to get everything from all my characters, like the 24 perpetual calibers I would need for Scarra and Layla. The final team going into Fontaine is Scaramouche, Tighnari, Fischl, and Layla. We meet the Grady twins at Romaritime Harbor, and they need us to collect the Romaritime flowers for them, which requires Hydro. We just used Barbara to get them, and now we're off to the Court of Fontaine. At the Court of Fontaine, we meet up with the guy who still thinks he's important enough for me to bring him up, who takes this battle for us. It's the only fight in Act 1, so we'll skip to Act 2. We investigate with Navia for a while, which eventually leads us to this underwater domain. The domain had a bunch of garden mechs, which varied in annoyingness. The first fight took under a minute and a half and wasn't that bad. The second fight took 2.5 minutes and was really annoying because of the cryo shooters and the electro balls, and the last one took 2 minutes and was not that bad. Next is Act 3 and 4, which are all dialogue and cutscenes but no fighting, so we'll skip to Act 5. First is the tower domain. Something annoying about this domain is how many Animo rogues there are. It practically makes one of my DPSs unusable, which of course slows down the fight. The first rogue battle took 3 minutes, and the second one on its own somehow almost took the same amount of time. The 3 Minor Trolls took a bit over a minute, but those 3 fights were just warm-up for the true final boss of Genshin Impact, the Ruin Garden 2 rogues. This room is way too small to maneuver around their attacks, and they are really strong and tanky. We lost Tighnari pretty early on and then lost Scarra soon after, which meant my 2 supports had to take them down. While they managed to take down the Ruin Guard, they eventually went down after a 6-minute fight, giving me my first combat loss of the playthrough. It didn't matter though, because we quickly respawned and then took him out in 3.5 minutes. With that domain done, we put Farina on trial for not being the real Archon, which long story short leads to us fighting 2 Hydro Gardemex. Both took about 2 minutes each and weren't too bad all things considered. Lastly is the all-devouring Narwhal. While I do think this fight was easy, the Narwhal did remind me of how frail we are. That one attack from the Narwhal dealt half of Tighnari's HP. What the fuck? Scarra almost died in the Shadow phase, but we were able to take it down without anyone falling. Act 5 is over, which means we beat Genshin Impact without building any characters. I expected that challenge to be a lot harder than it actually was. While fights were definitely getting quite slow by the end, I never felt that any fight was hard per se. Definitely a more annoying, grindy, slow, tough challenge, but with that being said, I did have fun. It wasn't like No More where at a certain point I felt like whatever I did, every fight would be hell. It actually required me to think more about the characters I was using and how well they worked together. On the tier list of difficulty, I'm putting this at the top of kind of difficult. If anything, this challenge makes me think that the No More challenge might actually be possible with better planning and team comps, but that doesn't mean I'm going to do it anytime soon. The final team on this challenge was Scaramouche, Tighnari, Fischl, and Layla. The characters that we used for a good bit of the playthrough that didn't end up on the final team were Fremine, Beidou, and Gaming. All of these characters were awesome and very helpful at one point or more during the playthrough, especially Tighnari. My next challenge will either be going back to the solo challenges with Fremine only, or will be the long overdue Genshin Impact Soul Link with Ciel of Stars. But until then, I'll leave you with that.